we are back with Kelsey Ellis. I am loving this conversation. And we left off with you really giving us your journey into your own personal relationship with your body and image, the kind of institutional and like things that you've inherited and we've brought that are structural racism and marginalized identities and how that all plays out in the way we feel in our bodies and the way we treat our bodies. And that is so important to set the stage for how you have created a roadmap kind of out of that, right? Like through the way that you move your body and the way that you teach others to take care of their bodies. And you've talked about living wholeheartedly. There's a couple of concepts you have. The first one I want to talk about is wholehearted living. And I want to know what that means to you to live wholeheartedly. But I also want to know after that, I want to talk a little bit about how we can join you on that movement and what that looks like in practice. So, what does wholehearted living mean for you?
Yeah, for me, my kind of personal definition of living wholeheartedly is being able to accept every part of myself, not just the good, not just the highlights, not just the successes and the accomplishments, but to really not only value the hard parts, but to actually learn how to translate that into something that can be for the good. How I can use, as people say, turning your pain into passion, how I can shine a light into those dark corners of my life and find clarity and understanding and not wanting to run and shy away from those more uncomfortable moments in my life. And I think for me, that is what really gives us this beautiful, well rounded understanding of ourselves, which allows us to then be more open and understanding to other people.
Beautiful. And so, how do we do that? Let's dig into what does that look like? I think we'll start with physical movement because I feel there's a like historical resistance in our community at some for some folks about movement, right? And about taking care of our bodies and exercise. And I love that you exist because and that you exist and champion marginalized identities and folks because we see ourselves in you. I keep saying this because when you've done a video with Kelsey or you're looking at Kelsey when she's working out, I feel like I'm working out next to a friend versus a fitness instructor personality. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I have those folks that I love too. I'm not anti working out with, fitness instructors, but there's something very special about you. And so that makes you better, I feel like, equipped to tell me and people like me how to best move our bodies, how to get started on that journey to treating ourselves better.
hmm I think, for a lot of people, especially if you're coming from a background where maybe your relationship with exercise hasn't been so positive, if we're kind of still carrying those stories and narratives like, I'm not good, I'm not athletic, I'm not fit, I can't run, all of those kind of highlight words, I can't, I never, I won't, right? Those ones that really box us into being maybe just giving us permission to not have to explore that discomfort, letting it go and being open and willing to rewrite your story, to have new experiences and know that the ones that you've had in the past do not need to define you and they don't need to inform how your future can look. For a lot of us, that kind of trauma of exercise maybe started in elementary school or high school where we weren't necessarily the fastest, maybe we weren't so good in gym class, maybe we were the last picked on the team, and we sometimes don't realize that we're still carrying that story, that fear of rejection, as we enter similar spaces like going to the gym or to a fitness studio many years later. And so I think a good place is to kind of just start with being open to redefining what wellness can look like for you. And, I like to offer up to people always, especially on my, my content that I create on social media, is remembering that fitness doesn't have a look. You know, Being an athlete doesn't necessarily have a look. Fitness can be what you make it. And for some people, that's going to look like dancing. For some people, that's going to be like rebounding on a trampoline. For some people, that's going to be rollerblading with their kids. And yeah, some people are going to be lifting in a gym, but that doesn't necessarily need to be you. So it's really finding what inspires you, what you find to be joyful in movement, um, and knowing that. your movement is going to look different from everybody else's. And that's not a good thing nor a bad thing. It just is.
That is such an important thing to highlight and to drive home because what ends up happening is you have these two kind of reactions to exercise or movement. I think it's really great to bring up and center that people have traumatic experiences with exercise, like, and creating a narrative where they're told they're not athletic. For a long time, I will say for myself, I would tell people I'm not athletic. And then I realized the things that I was good at just weren't traditional sports. Like I was good at other things. Like I was randomly good at floor hockey. I was randomly good at lacrosse. And yet that's not the typical, particularly when we're talking about gender identity and what should be, what girls should be playing, right, quote unquote. That just wasn't ever rewarded. So I told myself the narrative that I wasn't athletic. And then I think the other side, so that's one side, our own traumatic experiences and our own stories around exercise and movement. But then there's also the fact that the fitness industry has been taken over by what I call an aesthetic or a look. It's that now
Mhm.
people work out to look a certain way, not to even be well, not to. And so there's this rebellion to be like, if I can't look a prescribed way, which is very, Eurocentric. It's like we all know like the ideal body is this combination of bizarrely really thin with African features that you would have to be not thin to have. Like it's a very contradictory space, but also equally like,
Mhm.
ew, I don't want to be there, or I'm going to end up being miserable. I've done it, right? And I'm like, I'm not doing this no more. I'm getting older, or it's just not possible. And so those two different viewpoints are at war, I think, with us all the time. And I think it's important that we do get out. And so, where do you tell someone who is doing fitness either direction? Like they're doing it for aesthetic, a look, or they're doing it out of trauma and they're just hating it the whole way through. What are some of the mental kind of shifts on top of what you said before that we can start to do to get into enjoying taking care of our bodies?
Yeah, I think a big one, and maybe people have heard this kind of idea before, but really being able to really honor and validate the non-scale victories is a huge one. To remember that health and wellness doesn't have a look or a size. It's not something you're going to find in a clothing size. It's not going to be found when you look on the scale. It's going to be how your health allows you to show up as your fullest self every single day. And when we recognize that we have those moments like, oh my goodness, I walked up the stairs without feeling completely out of breath, or, I was able to grab my kid by the shirt before they ran into traffic, like those defining moments of feeling like your work is the seeds you've planted at the gym are actually coming to fruition are going to be so much more impactful, so much more valuable than having a physical look and still feeling like you're not capable of doing all of the other things. So, really, again, redefining what it means to be well, what it means to be healthy, and you have to look outside, like you said, of the typical fitness norm, because these spaces have historically been very exclusionary. They've had a very much an aesthetic look to them. I'm struggling right now with feeling like I can fit in with the Pilates modality, because I don't see a lot of people that look like me that do Pilates. It's been something that's been, touted as being lean, long muscles. I'm a 5'2" stocky girl. Okay. I no matter how much Pilates I do, I'll tell you what, I'm not gonna have lean, long muscles. So, it comes down to really being like, okay, well, if I'm not seeing myself in it, how can I show up and do the work and then be that source of inspiration for others who maybe never saw themselves in it either. And for me, that's the thing that keeps me going in the work that I do, to know that, yeah, maybe I am being at the forefront of these changes. And it's a really scary place to be, but I know that it's going to be worth everything that comes after that, and to invite other people who maybe haven't been invited to these spaces before the opportunity to explore modalities of fitness and movement that maybe they felt like they didn't even entertain the idea of because they never saw themselves in it.
And that's what makes you incredible too. I think people do need to see themselves to know that there's a possibility. And yes, you could do that without, I totally hear you with the Pilates space. I love Pilates, but don't see a lot of people in the space that look like us at all. And yeah, I came to love Pilates without that, but how much better it is when you do see someone that redefines wellness. And I think that's really what it's about. It's understanding movement is essential for wellness because it gets you to do the things you love. Your body is going to
Mhm.
take you the places you want it to go mentally, but it has to be well physically to even take you to the places you want to go mentally. Your body's going to take you to the
Mhm.
places you want to go physically. You want to be a traveler? Well, have you tried lugging through the airport and not being in good shape? Like, that's a nightmare. Have you tried
Yeah.
carrying your luggage upstairs in Europe? Terrible. So, your body being well is so crucial to you living the life you deserve. And I think the way you're branding that is so much more important than saying, you have to have a BMI, which everybody now knows is just not a good indicator of health. You have to be a certain weight, or you have to look a certain way, or promise lyingly that, like, if you do my 30-day workout, you're going to be looking a certain way that's just not in your body. And so
Yeah.
I think that is so important that we honor and center, because people are really struggling with that. And in the struggle, they just opt out of moving their body altogether by these narratives,
Definitely.
and
It's
that's why we have all that we have.
Yeah, for a lot of people, I think movement is the first thing to go, especially when you kind of come back to burnout. It's like, how can I even entertain the idea of moving my body right now when I can barely feel like I'm existing, like I'm getting through every day, just trying to like survive to get to the next one. And with that being said, I do want to remind people that movement, and the thing I think I love the most about movement is that it is instantaneous. You feel the impact of your movement emotionally, physically, and mentally immediately. Like those 10 minutes after, and you're riding that high, and you're like, wow, I feel like I was able to release, whether that's just energetically release something that I was kind of, holding on to, whether that just feeling that lifted mood, just feeling that sense of accomplishment in and of itself is instantaneous. And it's something that doesn't need 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours of movement to do to feel. You can feel that in 10 minutes. And so I want to, offer to people to consider maybe your movement doesn't need to be this 30-minute, 45-minute, 60-minute kind of strategic workout that we've been fed. It can be as simple as going for a walk in the sunshine. It can be as simple as, going ice skating in the winter. It can be as simple as just doing some movement and some flows of yoga in your living room as you wake up in the morning just to refresh your day. And then to know that that movement was enough, that you're not comparing it to what you did yesterday. You're not comparing it to what you think you should be doing, that you accept and honor that you did what you needed in that day and trusting that. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry what you did yesterday. To remember to just be here right now and know that in every day you're doing your best. And that best may look like 10 minutes of yoga. That best may look like an hour of skating. But those two things are not meant to be compared, and you're not morally better for doing more, and you're not worse for doing less.
That I think people definitely need to hear and need to understand. It's so freeing, right? You're releasing us from these rules, this narrative about what fitness and movement should be and what it should not be. And that brings us to, really, you're talking about finding ways to bring joy into how
Mhm.
you move your body and make it easy, make it instantaneous and doable. And so I always like to close out every interview talking about joy. So when we come back, I want you to tell us about joyful movement, which is something I've said before. There's actually an episode of the podcast called Opt into Joyful Movement, and how to bring more joy into the way we live in our bodies, and then how you bring joy into your life. So when we come back, Kelsey, we're going to talk all about joy. That's going to be on our next
Wonderful.
segment.